The USC Trojans and the Michigan Wolverines are teaming up in a way and pushing back against private equity entering in a deal with the Big Ten to infuse $2.4 billion into the conference. Let's get into it. What's up, Trojan family? Welcome to the USC LAFB show here on the LAFB network. I'm your host, Ryan Dyrud. And the story obviously came out a few days ago, and I mean, kind of sitting on it. We all have here at LAFB, kind of, trying to dive into it more, do some more research. I'll be honest with you, some of these business understandings take me a little while to digest and really understand fully, and so I didn't want to get on here and just ramble. So even saying that, like, I think we're going to learn this, we're going to go through this together. So I at least wanted to jump on, kind of give a brief, just kind of overview of what the deal is and what's happening, and then we'll probably have many subsequent videos to follow it kind of as this thing continues to divulge and roll out. And I'm sure most of you have heard, so just if not, though, on the surface level, essentially the Big Ten is exploring a potential deal, kind of a private equity, not a loan necessarily, but an infusion of investment of $2.4 billion into the Big Ten. They would give an equity stake of a new kind of Big Ten enterprise. I think it's literally called Big Ten Enterprises, kind of some other media arm. And they would give up 10% equity of that to this, investment company for the $2.4 billion. And it's basically a long-term deal, a 20-year deal that can spark an extension kind of halfway through that deal. And teams would get an upfront lump sum of money. And Ohio State, from what the report originally said, is kind of almost spearheading this with Michigan and USC, the two teams that are pulling back and not agreeing with the deal. So that's the very, very short end of it, but let's dive into it. So Ross Dellinger, who's a great reporter for Yahoo / On3, they're partnered obviously, but I think Yahoo is probably who pays his paychecks. the big, and that's what the original story came out on, was on Yahoo. He wrote more or did more reporting just was it this morning or yesterday, and kind of gave some bullet points of the real meat of this kind of deal. And so I'm just going to kind of read through this, and I'll kind of break it down point by point the way I understand it. Please, as always, comment below, leave your thoughts. And this is like I'd like to stick to just kind of football on the field and recruiting, but this is obviously a pretty massive story and deal because it could have big effects, whether the deal goes through, whether it doesn't, whatever. So, all right, so yeah, I'm just going to kind of read through this. This is from Ross Dellinger. So this deal is not with a traditional private equity company. It's with a public nonprofit entity that manages the capital investment University of California's Retirement and Endowment Fund and other cash assets known as UC Investments, totaling $200 billion. So, I mean, that alone, I don't know how you guys feel. That's a world that, you watch movies like The Big Short. Obviously these investment companies are taking people's money and investing it in hopes to get return. Obviously, UC Investments sees this as a big opportunity to bring return to their subsidiaries, their clients, whoever that might be. Obviously, it's within the University of California education system. So it's kind of considering they're not a true like hedge fund or whatever, it's kind of, to me, again, if there's any business people watching, you could probably explain it better. But to me, it already feels kind of murky that it's like a nonprofit endowment fund that would be actually funding this $2.4 billion thing. The Big Ten's deal is specifically with the Investors Pension Retirement Fund. So again, it just feels kind of odd to me. Could be, this could happen all the time. I don't really know, to be honest, but just it feels shady, right? Like this is what you hear in like Batman movies, that all of a sudden like pension fund got used, or what's that great movie? Based in New York, it's Brooklyn. There's some like mob movie that's all based on like the mob dipping into the pension fund or something. something Brooklyn, I think. One of you will remember, but great movie. Okay. It is purchasing a 10% stake at $2.4 billion in the league's new business subsidiary, Big Ten Enterprises, which is expected to serve as a more modernized entity to generate revenue through consolidated sponsorships, special events, and other initiatives. UC Investments will hold a very limited role in decisions within the Big Ten Enterprises and will have no decision-making power in the conference's day-to-day operations. It is expected to hold a single seat on the governing board of enterprises, giving it just 10% voting block. So based on that, they would really have no say outside of this arm of the Big Ten. So it's not necessarily a board member of the Big Ten Conference. It's just of this Big Ten Enterprises, which seems like it's just a dream at this point, not even like a real entity yet. So the offer from UC Investments requires it to hold its portion of enterprises for at least 15 years, meaning no quick sale of its 10% stake. Big Ten schools hold considerable authority on approving any sale after 15 years. The required 10-year extension of the grant of rights, so right now it would be a deal from 2026 to 2036, from 2036 to 2046, does not mean the Big Ten is extending its television agreement with Fox. Remember, their deal with Fox expires in 2036. So they would have to do a separate extension with that. The extension only extends the bond among the schools by 10 years, not the bond among the schools and Fox. UC's investments stake in the Big Ten Enterprises would generally allow it to earn 10% on future media rights, sponsorships, and event revenue. The other 90% would be split among Big Ten members. The investment contains no debt, meaning the league and its members do not have a repayment obligation. The Big Ten's annual media money alone is expected to exceed $1 billion within a few years. So, based on that, we got a few more points to get here, or I think that's kind of the gist of it. Last point, while Commissioner Tony Petitti has spearheaded the capital endeavor, Big Ten University presidents directed him to do so roughly a year and a half ago. The presidents, which it doesn't say who, in fact, rejected a more traditional debt deal, opting instead for the proposal now on the table, a concept that values the Big Ten at a whopping $24 billion. So, a lot there, obviously. And some of that I'm going to even just dive in more so and probably do another video and articles up on LAFB Network, kind of diving into that. So, but on the surface level, the deal itself isn't necessarily terrible when you figure it's a non-debt deal. You know, but a lot of, or let me just say this. Loans, obviously, you owe back. If you take out a private loan or whatever it may be, you owe that back, and most of the time with a lot of interest. So that's more so like you need desperately a cash infusion, whether it's due to struggling or whether it's due to launching something new that you just need the upfront cash to cover. This is a true investment like you see in startups and all different, business arms out there, where it is hey, here's an investment. I have equity, and if we succeed, we succeed together. If we fail, we fail together. So on that side, at least it's not a loan that you're like garnering interest. Where it's not great is for schools such as USC. Like if you don't need, and this is one piece of it, if you don't need this cash influx, why would you want to give up future revenues? If you're giving for the foreseeable future 10% of all kind of revenues within a new media deal or whatever, like, why would you want to give that up for $150 million up front? Now, $150 million is a lot of money, but, you're going to give up probably more of that over a decade plus of whatever new media rights deal. And so, and it's 10% obviously from the top, and then you still got to split it 18 ways. So I haven't sitting here and done the math, but that's just kind of the surface level. Like, why would you want to give up future revenues if you don't need the cash infusion right now? So I think that's one piece of why USC is pushing back. The other piece why USC pushing back, and it's the main piece, which wasn't listed in that breakdown, is the actual distribution of the $2.4 billion. And these are kind of loose numbers, but based on Dellinger's reporting, Ohio State, Michigan and Penn State would stand to earn $190 million in upfront cash. USC and Oregon would receive 40 to 50 million less, so they'd be at that 150 or 140 million range, and then the remaining 13 schools receive 100 to 110 million. So that's more kind of the bigger qualm with USC. Call it arrogant, call it cocky, whatever you want, but it's also just a fact, is USC is one of the biggest brands in college football, in sports, period, and yet they're at a tier below Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, and they're on the same tier as Oregon. So I'm not saying they would agree to it if they were put in that top tier, but it would certainly help. And so that is like the big pushback from USC, and why, you know, they're basically pushing back, saying like, okay, we don't really need to necessarily do this. Now, the big question, and here's like the biggest question now that we'll have to see as more of these discussions go. And what's hard with USC in this regard is they have an interim president, just like Michigan. Ironically enough, both schools have an interim president right now. And so obviously they want to at least kick this down the road until they have that leadership in place. Now, you know, Jen Cohen obviously has been involved. There's a 40-person board of trustees at USC that are heavily involved. So there are plenty of bright, smart decision makers in this process. But the question now becomes, like, if the Big Ten, again, legality, I don't know for sure. Maybe we'll try to get like a lawyer on as a guest. But if they somehow can push this through with only 16 votes and not the full 18, there's been that speculation and rumors that, hey, could USC just leave the Big Ten altogether? The Big Ten has actually come out or maybe not they've come out, but there's been mouthpieces that have said the Big Ten have threatened USC and Michigan that, hey, if you don't go through with this, you have 2 years to basically get on board and sign on, or else you miss out on that you miss out on the entire investment deal, so you get zero money, and we will potentially not renew your contract to be in the Big Ten. And so, while on the surface that sounds kind of like, oh man, that's a big deal, you know, USC and Michigan, for that matter, are kind of two of the schools out there that could be like, okay, like, you need us more than we need you, right? Like, goes back to the USC Notre Dame thing. Like, you need us a lot more than we need you. Well, the Big Ten, if they were to lose Michigan and USC, that's the dumbest thing any leader of an organization, of an entity, could do. I mean, that goes back to Pac-12 negligence, right? We saw what happened to the Pac-12 when USC left. You really think if USC and Michigan leave the Big Ten, they're going to be in a better spot, even with this influx of cash, which do they really need? So can USC go independent? The hard thing with independence is how do you make it work for the rest of the programs in the athletic department? USC football, 1,000% could go independent easily. You could argue it might be better for them. Now, I do still think their deal with the Big Ten, like, I want this to work out. I think that they're better off in the Big Ten. It's a great conference overall. The competition's great. You got, you know, the big media rights deal. But if USC football wanted to go independent, they could absolutely do it and probably get a really good media deal to play every one of their games, similar to how Notre Dame has with NBC. No question about that. The question is the rest of the programs. And, you know, they have a really elite programs. We know women's basketball is a national brand. We know men's basketball is on the rise. Obviously, the Olympic sports are some of the most elite in college sports. The soccer team is elite. Water polo, like, it's an elite athletic program all around. But just because you have the athlete program, like, a lot of those sports don't make revenue. So it would be finding a home then for those sports, similar to how Notre Dame has football independence. I think hockey is the Big Ten and the rest are in the ACC. Would the USC do a similar thing? Will they put football independent and then the rest somehow work it out to stay in the Big Ten? Or do they put the rest down in the SEC? Do they go to the Big 12? Some have said the ACC. Obviously, that's even farther travel, but at this point, what's the difference between going to Rutgers or going to Clemson? So that's kind of what it boils down to, is not just affecting football, but the rest of the athletic department. And so that's kind of the thing we'll have to dive into and see if it gets to that point. Now, obviously, all sides want to keep this thing going. A lot of these are just, threats, blind threats that don't really service or help anyone. So how do you actually decipher what those threats can become? Because, again, the Big Ten pushing out outside of Ohio State, the biggest brands, would make absolutely preposterous business decision, even for a $2.4 billion investment. And I believe in that report, UC Investments have said even if Michigan and USC did not want to move forward, they would still move forward with that $2.4 billion. So they seem gung-ho on just getting involved in it, regardless of who's all there. So we'll see what happens. I think the big question a lot, too, has been why is Ohio State in this? Like, why are they not joining Michigan and USC? Like, they shouldn't be they don't need this. Ohio State's one of the biggest brands in all of football by far. I think they've almost spearheaded it in a way because they do get that higher capital entity, that higher amount, which gives them more spending power up front. And they're always going to be one of the leaders at that forefront. Michigan is too, which is kind of ironic that they are against this, kind of seeing that future revenue of what they kind of don't want to happen. So it's a lot to get into, a lot to see. The distribution model is interesting. Obviously, some of the schools at the bottom are on board just because they probably actually need this capital infusion. I mean, when you look at Purdue, Rutgers, Maryland, Northwestern has a lot of other money elsewhere, a lot of big endowment. But some of those other schools, like, they just don't have the revenue streams that the top ones have. So this would be, 100 to 110 million, would be great for them to get, that they could sprinkle out over, 5 to 10 years. So, a lot. But leave your comments below. What do you guys think? Do you think the Big Ten will actually push out USC? Do you think USC might be worth exploring independence? Or do you think in reality this is all one of those kind of big smoke screens, and in reality nothing actually happens and things move on as is? So leave your comments below. I'll try to get to as many of them as I can. Like I said, I'm still learning on this, still doing a bunch of research on it. More stuff will come out, so we'll have another video out as soon as we learn more. Tonight, Tim and Jamal are going to be doing the call-in show. They were supposed to do it last night. Something came up. So I'm sure they'll touch on this too. So if you have some burning thoughts, call into the show. They'll drop the StreamYard link. The number will be up on the screen on that show. So call in, leave your thoughts. And obviously they'll be talking Iowa as well, as we have a monster game on the field. So I'll be back with more recruiting news later. Got some little recruiting tidbits, a little more up my alley. But thanks for hanging out and bearing with me going through some business jargon. But appreciate you, family. And as always, fight on. Hey, Trojan family, thank you so much for hanging out and watching the USC LAFB show. Before you go, let me tell you quickly about our friends over at Sleeper. Go right now, download the Sleeper app. It's the #1 sports app, not just for season-long fantasy, but they've got live pickers, they've got live stat updates, they've got a chat you can chat with other users, plus the daily pick'em, which is a blast, or daily fantasy, whatever you want to call it. You go and pick 2 to 8 players across any sports. If you're talking USC, go choose Jade Mayav in his next matchup. Pick more or less passing yards, more or less touchdowns. You stack those, and you can win real money. When you go to make your first deposit, make sure you use our promo code USCLAFB. You're going to get a match deposit up to $100. Put in $100, you get $100 free to play with from Sleeper. Put in $10, they'll match you that $10. So now you're sitting at $20 to play with. But also right now, for any new users, no deposit required. You get $20 free entry. You can stack both. You can get the $20 for free. Go make a deposit. Use USC LAFB. And now you've got a bunch of free money to play with right there on the Sleeper app. Check it out, Trojan family. And when you do, tell them the guys at the USC LAFB sent you.